if there is one tip that everyone on the internet keeps repeating, it's never ever cook a steak without a thermometer. And I couldn't disagree more. In this video I'll explain why you should not fully rely on your thermometer and why not using one will actually take your steak game to the next level. And of course I'll show you how to nail the real touch test by the end of this video. For this occasion I'm going to use two different steak cuts, and I'm talking about a strip loin and a tenderloin. Let's just start by saying that yes, whenever you are starting, of course, a thermometer is crucial, and I always recommend all my Steak Academy members or everybody that has been a part of my Facebook group Steak Tips and Tricks that a thermometer is crucial. But once you start mastering steaks a little bit, you will see that you actually don't need to use a thermometer, because I always teach all my students to cook by temperature and feeling. The feeling aspect is so important because then you start to really notice and become a true master of cooking steaks. And another thing that makes cooking steaks without thermometer really special is this uncertainty and this excitement. And here's how it looks like. So when you have some people over, especially if it's a big steak dinner or steak party, you're cooking multiple steaks, and then everybody is eagerly waiting for your steaks. And if you are a steak master, which I hope you will be, people have high expectations. And then you of course don't want to disappoint everybody, you want to deliver the best steaks. And if you are not using a thermometer, it makes the whole experience 10 times more interesting and more enjoyable. Because you have this uncertainty, and then when you finish steak cooking and then you lay all of your amazing steaks on the board, a part of you is not sure if you really nailed it, and then you have to wait for the resting time. Everybody's eager around the table, waiting just for the steaks, and then when it's time to slice those steaks, and you see your amazing steaks, and then once you take that first slice and you see, wow, I cooked it to perfection, your joy, your excitement, everything is through the roof, and you just enjoy so much. The other important aspect is that a thermometer is not always 100% accurate. What do I mean by that? Especially if you're having thinner steaks and if you are using high heat. Sometimes when you place your thermometer inside the steak, it will read that the temperature is too big. Then you take it out, you rest it, wait, slice it, and then you see, oh my god, wow, the temperature is actually too low, the steak is raw. That's why it's really important to also master the touch test, because then when you combine the thermometer and the touch test, you can never be fooled. The steaks are now dry, so let me show you how to actually grill them to perfection without using a thermometer. The reason I'm using two different steak cuts, and I especially use the strip loin and the tenderloin, because whenever you are cooking steaks with a touch test, the most important part is to understand what is rare and medium rare for certain steak cuts. For instance, the tenderloin will be always more tender and more bouncy at the same temperature as the strip loin, because the tenderloin is naturally more tender. And whenever you have steaks tied, it will always be firmer, because the butcher swine is pushing the steak together, holding it, and that way the steak is firmer on the touch. Since these steaks are pretty lean, we're gonna use olive oil, because it will help us that our steaks don't burn on the grill and create a better crust. And you can always use both of your steaks and just rub it in, just to have a tiny layer of the olive oil across the whole surface. You can also use beef tallow. Again, always freshly ground black pepper. So whenever you are cooking with the touch test, the most important part is to always touch your steak throughout the whole process. When it's raw, after the first flip, after the second flip, because you want to feel it cooking. And if you're just starting out and want to master a touch test, you should always use a thermometer, and then you place your thermometer and then you see, okay, this is how 30 degrees Celsius feels like. This is how 45 degrees Celsius for a strip loin feels like. This is how this temperature feels for the tenderloin, and this is the best and fastest way to master it. And since the tenderloin is bigger, I'm gonna start first with the tenderloin. Wow, look at this crust. Exactly the crust you want to achieve. What I want to show you is when you have the butcher's twine. You can see when I touch my steak, it's really bouncy, but my finger is not really dipping inside, even though it's a light touch. And when I also touch the sides, it's pretty firm, all because of the butcher's twine. And I'm gonna take it, and now you will see how the steak will react much differently without the butcher's twine. Look at this. You can clearly see how much more bouncy it is. And this is a sign that this is still raw. When I push my finger, it's almost not going up. Now this is completely raw. And when you also compare raw steak, you can see how when you touch it, it's not coming back. And now we're gonna continue finishing this steak on the gentle side, and we're now gonna create the crust on the stripling. As you can see, the perfect crust. And so after the first flip, as you can see, really raw. Another thing, whenever your steak is so raw as this is right now, is you can push it because it's still raw. There's basically zero juices coming out, and this really benefits your crust. And now, as you can see, another perfect crust. So if you're using a thermometer, you need to check the temperature from this part and from this part, because this part will cook faster since it's thinner than this one. And if you would just check the temperature, for instance here, it would be wrong. But if you also use the touch test, you can always touch the whole steak and see, okay, this side is firmer, it's cooked more, then I need to focus a little bit more on this side to slower the cooking temperature on this part and maintain the same on this one. And that's why always touching the steak all around is super necessary. And now let's just sear the sides on this one, and why not check the internal temperature of this one. At this point, this steak had a total cooking time of around 3.5 to 4 minutes, 1.5 to 2 minutes per side. And now we can check temperature, and we can see by the touch test it's still raw. But look what our thermometer says. Our thermometer says it's 124 degrees Celsius Fahrenheit, which is actually not true. This is almost medium rare. If we touch the steak, we can see it's raw. So this is one of the reasons that I don't ever rely only on thermometers. This is happening quite commonly whenever you use high heat and steaks thinner than 2 inches. I'm not 100% sure why, but I guess the big gap in the temperature and heat transferring from the outside, the crust, and the inside of our steak can confuse the thermometer, and that's why I believe this is happening. Let's check this side. Okay, here the thermometer says 108 degrees Celsius. Interestingly, we can see that the thermometer showed a higher temperature on this part than on this, which we also said because of the thickness. You can see when I touch this steak how it's firmer than this one. You can clearly see how much more bounce this whole side has compared to this one. Okay, we have both steaks with an amazing crust, and neither one of them is ready to take out. And now we will compare the temperatures and how they both feel when we touch them. Something really interesting is here happening. I can actually see that the tenderloin is basically almost ready for takeout. I would say the temperature is around probably 45 to 48 degrees Celsius. Let's check. So it says 124. The thermometer says it's around 51 degrees Celsius, but from my experience, I can say that this is a bit lower than what the temperature said. And that's why it's really important to have the touch test mastered, because now I can see, okay, this is almost ready. Let's check the strip line. It now says on this side 122, while here it says 117. We need to cook it a bit more. Whenever you have this exact movement where you touch the steak and you can see how the edges are still moving, the steak is not done yet. It's getting to rare, and then once you touch your steak and you can see the edges are not moving as much as here, you can feel, okay, now this steak is ready to be taken out. Another really important aspect whenever you're cooking steaks, no matter if you use the touch test or the thermometer, it depends what method you are using. I'm gonna show you the exact moment when this steak will be ready based on knowing how much the carryover heat will actually have the impact. So the hotter the outside, the more the temperature will rise once our steak is resting. So that's why we can always touch our steak, and then as soon as we sense that the steak is getting closer to rare, at one point the steak becomes almost firm to the touch, and then you can see, okay, it's not anymore rare. And when this is happening, if you're using high heat, basically you need for this thickness like 30 seconds per side, and then your steak is gonna be ready. The thermometer says 133, and we will see once we slice our steak if this looks like 133, which is approximately 55 degrees Celsius. And now we're just gonna slightly sear the sides. I want medium rare. I just check it again. The bounce is now immediately pushing back, and now I can see, okay, this steak is ready. You can now clearly see the difference if we compare it from before this touch test and the one before we took our steak there. Let's now check the doneness. This says 140 and this one 125. This is a great example actually in the end, so we can compare the temperatures. Once you cook your steak and use a thermometer, please feel it and touch it. This is pretty firm, but when you touch it here, we can see it's 100% more bouncy. And this is the perfect temperature to take your steak out once we want to rest our steak and finish with the carryover heat to have that perfect edge-to-edge medium rare doneness. And if we now touch this one, you can see in the bare middle, it's pretty bouncy, and this steak has been resting for 10 minutes. And this steak needs 7 or 8 more minutes. Our steaks are almost ready, and just before we slice, a few key take points. Mastering a touch test is a really important aspect of every true steak master, because then you can rely on your actual knowledge and temperature and feeling, and not on a thermometer. Many times I had many scenarios where I followed my gut, followed my feeling, and the steaks turned out amazing, especially when you're cooking for your friends and family, and then you nail the temperature without the thermometer. You just feel so much better. Not just the eating experience, but the whole cooking experience and the rest of the night really become that much more special. Let's check how we actually did with those steaks. So if we can remember, the thermometer said 134 to 135. As we can see, this is actually perfect medium rare. For my liking, when it comes to the fillet, I would like it a bit even less cooked. Let's now check the other steak. As we can see, this is perfect medium rare. Let's now quickly see what the temperature is on this part. Temperature said that this was well above medium rare, but if we look closely, we can see that this is actually perfect medium rare as well. And this is also one of the reasons it's not always good to rely on your thermometer. Let's now check the strip loin. I would say a pretty solid dry aged steak. This is Croatian domestic beef. Definitely, if it had more marbling, it would be even better. But overall, really good typical steak. Okay, let's try the tenderloin. Really good. This was actually frozen. It kinda lost some of its juiciness, but great flavor, and tenderness, of course, is amazing. So, what's the verdict? Thermometers are a crucial tool for anyone starting out and should be used during learning the touch test. But if you really want to become a true steak master who cooks and enjoys steaks to the fullest, relying both on tools and your expertise as well, mastering the touch test is one of the best things you can do. As always, let me know what you want to see next, and until next week, stay calm.